On today's episode of Phinside The NFL, I am joined by NFL Network analyst and insider Cam Wolfe, who's been at Dolphins Training Camp. We'll discuss everything he's seen, the Miami Dolphins' upcoming season, and a whole lot more. Keep it locked in. Smash that like button. Subscribe if you are new. And let's get into this.
Loses the football. Touchdown! Got it! You have got to be kidding me. Jaylen Waddle has a Dolphin touchdown. And he will score! Field on the near side, man open. Touchdown! The run from Tua Tagovailoa. Touchdown! He's going deep. He's got it for the touchdown again!
Beautiful day to be a Dolphin fan.
Let's go!
What's good, Fin Nation? What's good? We're back here for another one. It's your boy Reason, and today I'm joined by the great Cam Wolfe from NFL Network. Second offseason in a row you've been a part of this channel, Cam. It's a pleasure to have you back on the channel.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, my man.
Always a good conversation with you, Cam. So let's hop right into it. First of all, great work. You've been going around training. Fantastic work you're doing there. You've already visited the Miami Dolphins training camp. Now, I know when you were there, it wasn't as bad as it is right now in terms of the injuries stacking up in the secondary, but what are your early impressions of this team from what you've seen at camp?
Yeah, I've been out there probably 4 or 5 days in camp now. We did the one day for TV this past Saturday, and we'll do another for NFL Network this upcoming Saturday. Tom Pelissero and Brian Ballinger will be in town for that. So we'll talk ball this Saturday. But my biggest takeaway is a couple of things. One, secondary obviously has a lot of question marks. That when we were there that day, it was the day Cater got hurt. Later turns out to be the torn ACL. Ashton Davis also gets hurt recently if he's already been out. So the biggest thing is early in the season, they were already going to have some issues with communication, with some chemistry with that bunch. But now the talent just took a huge hit. And so the front seven is going to have even more pressure on them to get home because that secondary for sure is going to have a lot of question marks around it. So I like the Mike Hilton move. He's a dog. He's going to help them a lot in the slot. But there's certainly a lot of uncertainty about who those starting cornerbacks are going to be on the outside. And once you start facing those teams like Buffalo, like Baltimore, they're going to expose that real quick.
Do you see a world where it's Storm Duck, Jack Jones, and Mike Hilton between the boundary and the slot being your three starting guys? Or do you think they're going to maybe circle back to Rasul Douglas or maybe check in on Asante Samuel, who's supposed to be cleared this month with his neck injury?
Yeah, season started today. I think you're probably right. Those are probably your starting three corners: Storm Duck, Jack Jones, Mike Hilton. And it's crazy because two of those guys, Jack Jones and Mike Hilton, just got here 3 days ago. That kind of tells you where they are with their cornerback depth. Guys don't even know the defense. They probably don't even know what all the calls are, but the talent tells you what it is. Cam Smith is still a work in progress. We still got to see it. They put the onus on him. I haven't seen it a lot so far in camp. Maybe things change once we put the pads on and play joint practices more consistently. But I think right now he hasn't shown anything to show you can trust him as a starter on the field. And so, yeah, they certainly got to look at more options. That's not enough to go into the cornerback room and hope to make a playoff push from what I've seen. So, Asante Samuel Jr., they talked to a couple times. I think the big thing for him is he healthy? He's coming off that neck injury. And, when they talked to him previously, he wasn't fully healed. There was talk that maybe in August he would be closer to healed. So maybe they revisit that in a couple of weeks if he's still on the same tack. And then Rasul Douglas, the numbers are the issue there. They've offered him a contract multiple times, and he doesn't think they're at the right number value. And so, either Rasul Douglas budges at some point or the Dolphins come up on their number. But I do think they add at least one more cornerback before this offseason's up.
One aspect not being talked enough about, I think, about Artie Burns getting hurt is he's kind of a special team specialist. So there's a void now in terms of those snaps that I think we all assumed he would be gobbling up the Sear and Neal snaps.
For sure.
And now that Artie Burns is down, Mike Hilton really isn't known for being a specialist on special teams.
Right.
Do you think it's a guy like Cornell Armstrong or someone like that ends up getting his reps?
Yeah, whoever your fourth, fifth corner are, they're going to have to be able to play special teams. So, like, if it is the three guys we mentioned on the team, if you bring in a fourth, well, one of those guys gets bumped out, can Storm Duck play special teams? That's going to have to help him secure a role. And then whoever finds that other spot, whether it's Jason Marshall, I know a lot of fans like him. Can he play the core four? Ethan Bonner, who has flashed at times, can he take that role? Whoever takes that role as far as the better special teams player may get that fifth cornerback spot just out of need. And you look at the safety rooms too, the same question mark. You'll probably have, your core three safeties and Minkah Fitzpatrick and Ashton Davis if he's ready by the start of the season. And then the rest of those guys, Dante Trader Jr., your Elijah Campbell's, your Patrick Morris's, your fourth and fifth safety, your 10th and 11th DB, they're going to have to be your core special teams guys. So we'll see in preseason who wins that battle. But you're right, losing a guy like that definitely helps hurt your special teams.
Do you think a Zach Sieler extension gets done during camp?
I hope so. I mean, he deserves it. I think that he has handled it in a way that Dolphins organization should appreciate. He's been at camp, he's practiced, he's vocalized, he just thinks he deserves it, but not making a huge stomp about it. And I think the dynamic comes for the Dolphins. Last offseason, they got burned on a few of these extensions. I could tell they're a lot more hesitant this offseason, which is why we saw Jonnu traded, which is why, we see Minkah Fitzpatrick essentially just getting a signing bonus instead of an extension. I think they're a lot more hesitant to hand out that you had a really good year or a really good 2 years and hand out the extension. And evaluation is the right point. Zach Sieler's agent, Drew Rosenhaus, is rightfully probably saying 10 plus sacks back-to-back years. Let's look at the guys who've done that. We should be $25-30 million range. And the Dolphins probably are not there yet. And so you just got to find that medium. I know they've continued to talk. But they know they have him under contract this year regardless. So I think it could go either way. It's just whether or not Zach Sieler is going to end up taking whatever the Dolphins have offered as their best offer, as he's done a couple times before.
They've added Kenneth Grant to that front seven. Jordan Phillips has been making some waves since the pads came on at camp.
Yep.
Jaylen Phillips is back. Bradley Chubb is back. Grayson Murphy showing a little bit of, a little pass rush forte, though his arm length probably leaves some to be desired. Mo Kamara, we're hoping, takes another step. And then Jordan Brooks is, from everything I've heard, he's looked really good in camp. I mean, everyone knows Willie Gay's been a standout and probably pushing Tyrell Dotson for that linebacker 2 spot. Yep. Do you see this being potentially, if they stay healthy, especially at the edge spot, Cam, could this potentially be one of the better front sevens in the AFC?
Well, one is going to have to be. That's the route of this being a good defense. But I do think that's the strongest part of their defense and maybe potentially their team. But right now, like it's potential, right? Yeah. Like we're talking about the what could be's, and a lot of it is based on health. If Jaylen Phillips each. Chop Robinson can translate what he did as a rookie into year 2, then that's probably one of the better trios of pass rushers in the league. You mentioned the linebackers. One of the first things I noticed watching them in practice, they're fast. They get all over the ball. Can they stay with the Josh Allen, with some of these gadget players they have running around here at a different level than they've been able to before? Can they stop tight ends at a different level than they've been able to get challenged before? They're going to have Tyler Warren coming into town week 1 when they go up to Indy. That's going to be a big early challenge. I think that we're going to learn a lot about this team with the aggression level they get from their front seven. That's going to have to be their identity.
Do you see this being a big breakout year for Chop Robinson?
I do. I think that a lot of what we're hearing from teammates is based on what they see even behind closed doors. One of my favorite questions to ask other players is like, who's gonna be the guy that jumps on our scene this year that we're gonna talk about as like one of the best players on the team? And Chop Robinson has been the number one answer among anyone. And so, you got guys in his position group that are technically competing for playing time with him, calling them defensive player of the year candidates. He may not even be a week one starter. It may be Jaylen Phillips and Bradley Chubb and Chop coming off the bench as a third rusher. But I think it shows you his potential. I think he's eager to prove people wrong who say he can't set the edge, you can't stop the run. And I think you're going to see a more complete rusher in Chop Robinson this year. And so, I think that year 2 jump is going to be nice. And wouldn't it be cool if the Dolphins find a way to get 3 guys with 10 plus sacks on the edge and maybe a 4th with Zach Sieler? That's just tantalizing to think about.
Yeah, because then who cares what happens in the secondary if that's going on? You know what I mean?
Right.
Let's flip to the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, one of the best stories coming out has been Patrick Paul. A lot of us were just like, I mean, specifically on this platform, we're like, Patrick, all we need is competent play from him, and we're going to be good. We're going to be good. But it seems like he's giving more than that, especially since the pads come on. What have been your early impressions of what you've seen from Patrick Paul? And does Dolphin management have a little bit of a swagger to them that they think they found potentially a left tackle for the next 10 to 15 years with this guy?
Yeah, Patrick Paul, once those pads came on, is different man. You can use that physicality. He's like, hey, t-shirt and shorts, y'all might be able to run past me, but when I get my hands on you, it's a little bit different. He's that big bear. You think you can run around him, but eventually he's going to catch you. So, and he's got some moves. I've been impressed. He hasn't lost many one-on-ones in 3 days of practice, and that's going against the Jaylen Phillips and Bradley Chubb and Chop Robinson, guys we just raved about. So I think it says a lot about his potential. Now he's going to have to clean up some technique stuff. Like, he's not Teron Armstead. There's going to be some times that he may have poor technique and it leads to a sack, and you're going to have some growing pains. There's going to be some times where fans are like, dang, what was he doing? But I think there's going to be more and more times where you're like, man, he's opening up a hole in the run game. Man, he really is getting a hold of this elite edge rusher. And I hadn't heard his name for 2 quarters because, Patrick Paul is in locks. And I think that's the potential you talk about. That's the potential excitement you hear from Chris Greer and Brandon Shore and Mike McDaniel of like, man, year 1, we may have to go through some bumps of him as a full-time starter, but man, year 2, year 3, he could end up being, this really, really good left tackle, which I don't know a lot of people thought when he got drafted in the bottom of the 2nd round.
Yeah. At least from what you've seen, do you think a lot of that technique needs to be worked on, especially in the screen game from what you've seen with him?
Yeah, just time, honestly. Time in the scheme. He played a different system in Houston. He's got to be able to move differently. Your feet, the way you set, the way you move in the second level, like you're talking about. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the scheme runs behind these linemen because they're bigger on the left side. Traditionally, NFL lines, your right guard and your right tackle are your big hulking dudes. It looks like from what Jonah told us, he's been lining up next to Patrick Paul. And so you've got Patrick Paul and Jonah, your big, 335-pound and 325-pound linemen on the left side. Do they run the power stuff behind that and maybe allow him to do a little bit more physicality instead of movement and do the finesse, more speed stuff off the right side with Austin Jackson and James Daniels? That's going to be something that I'm eager to see when we get to preseason and joint practices.
Let's talk about the interior a little bit because there's potential. There's some, I know that word again, potential. But Jonas Savaianaya, Aaron Brewer, and James Daniels, man, I mean, that could, that could feed families right there. What have been your early thoughts on Jonas Savaianaya? And here's the thing, Cam, I want to get you. You've had your eyes on him. I won't be down there till the August 19th, 20th, and 21st practices.
Okay.
James Daniels, Cam, does he look like the guy before the Achilles injury and not a guy coming off an Achilles injury? Because that's going to be key.
Yeah. So first, I'll start with Jonah. I think Jonah is very strong. Another guy, when you watch him in one-on-ones, he's holding his own against Kenneth Grant, against Zach Sieler. Like, they're not just ragdolling him that you'd expect a rookie's getting beat. No, he's holding his own. I think that he's another guy where – he's got to get used to a new position. He told us a little bit about him playing left guard. I've talked a little bit about this, but, I think 2018, Josh Sidden, the veteran guard, told us one time that playing opposite side when you're used to is like wiping your butt with your opposite hand. And he essentially said, try it and see how, how comfortable you are with it. And I tried it and wasn't very comfortable. And so I get the idea that, Jonah's still working through the comfort. He had been a right guard is primarily his time at Arizona, moving to the left side and getting the comfort level there. But that being said, I think that he's progressing well. He's been with the key group most of the time. I'd expect right now him to unquestionably be the starting guard at that spot. And then on James Daniels' side, he's moved a lot better than I anticipated. Coming off the torn Achilles, I think he suffered that in October. A lot of times it takes a full year for you to get back. And so I wasn't certain if we were going to see him and team this early in July. And he's been moving well. I don't know if he's at the same level he was before the injury yet. I think some of that last 10% has to come through real reps, having the full confidence to can I explode off that Achilles without worrying about it popping again. So maybe we're still a month away from that, but to see him move, to see him be able to pop the way he has in practice, I think is a good sign for his week one availability.
Let's stick with the offensive line here for a second. Keon Smith has been working primarily at guard. I know they've been really trying him at right guard. Larry Borum has basically been working with different units at left tackle and right tackle. Austin Jackson, I mean, you could make the argument he's hurt more than Jaylen Phillips and Tua Tagovailoa, and you'd be right. What are your thoughts? Do they need, with Borum working with multiple units and Keon Smith getting more of a guard look, do you think a position that no one's talking about, everyone's like, okay, maybe they need to add a safety because of Ashton Davis, or maybe they need a corner because of Kader Gohu? Would you say they need another swing tackle potentially added into the fray?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely need more offensive line depth. But guess what? 31 teams in the NFL probably saying, hey, we need a better sixth offensive lineman, seventh offensive lineman. There's a lack of dearth of offensive linemen across the league, which is why you can't just pick up a random free agent in July at guard or tackle the way you can, like Miami did at corner. They just found two guys who we've already said they're going to be key contributors. They're just not sitting out there. If you're 320 pounds and you can play and you're healthy, you're on the team. And so I think they're at a position now where maybe they make a trade, around cut down day of your bubble guy for my bubble guy and can find a swing tackle. But right now, I think they're hoping that they're getting enough from a Keon Smith. They're getting enough from a Larry Borum that they can play those multiple backup spots to where, hey, if somebody gets hurt, you can fill in at a pinch at guard or tackle or guard or center. And so, like anything, you need help at that position. I don't feel great about them if they do get some injuries. But you probably could say that for, like I said, at least 25 of the 32, that if they lost their starting right tackle or if they lost their starting left tackle, they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. Okay, Liam Eichenberg, been out for a little bit. We'll stick with the offensive line. One more question here. Liam Eichenberg, been out for a little bit, but they got Daniel Brunskill in. From what I hear, Daniel Brunskill has been working all across the interior. Who do you see as the top depth option right now? Do you see it as maybe Daniel Brunskill or Liam Eichenberg? Because I've heard Daniel Brunskill has been actually pretty good.
Yeah, I think Brunskill gets an advantage because he knows the scheme. And so he doesn't have the catch up that maybe another guard would have competing with a guy like Liam who knows the scheme. That's Liam's greatest advantage right now. Regardless of what fans think about him as a player, he's played almost everywhere and he knows exactly what he's doing. And so that brings a value for your backup lineman because you don't want to get in the game and they're like, wait, what's power right? What's duo? What am I supposed to do here? I haven't played right guard. I only played left guard. You want a guy that, hey, the center gets hurt, you can go in. The right guard gets hurt, you can go in. Left guard gets hurt, you can go in. And that's Liam's asset right now. But I think Brunskill, as we're talking about, as he gets more reps, you get more comfortable with him in the role. And ideally, you get two of them. Ideally, you have two of them where they're both active and you said, hey, if we lose two guys, we feel great. But only one of them can be the first one off the bench. And I think that's what they're competing for. You can't make the spot if you're not on the field. So right now, I think Dane's, trying to establish himself at that spot.
Quinn Ewers versus Zach Wilson. I know McDaniel kind of put this to bed and named Zach Wilson the quarterback too. But A, have you been impressed with what you've seen from Ewers early on? And B, Cam, was he ever really going to stand a chance with them guaranteeing about $6 million to Zach Wilson? I mean, was he ever going to really get – we know the politics of money and guaranteed money. Do you think he was ever really going to have a shot at quarterback too with that money on the table?
Yeah, probably not. Probably not. I mean, money does get you solidifications, and a lot of times in free agency, things are said or promised. Hey, we
Yeah.
want to bring you in here to be Tua's backup. You don't want to create a dynamic where you're telling free agents one thing and one thing is different. And also, I would say it'd be different if I would be watching him in camp, and it's very clear that Quinn Ewers is better every single day. I don't think I've got that feel. In fact, like Quinn had in my view, a rough OTA period. Where he struggled. Zach had some struggles too, but Quinn in particular really struggled. And then in training camp, Quinn has turned it up. In the last week of training camp, he has been, looked really good. Looked like the guy that they saw the upside of being a long-term backup for. So at this stage, training camp, I'd probably say Quinn has been looking better, but Zach was looking better in OTAs, and we haven't got to preseason games. So I think the Colts once said, we don't practice a lot with our backup quarterbacks because we don't practice getting screwed. And if we lose Peyton, we get screwed. The Dolphins lose Tua for a significant amount of time. They're screwed. This is more of a question of it. Hey, he sprains the ankle. You need him for a drive or two. You need him for a game or two. But I don't think either quarterback has done enough for me to say, hey, they can hold down the fort for 4, 6, 8 games while Tua was out.
Yeah. Have you been surprised by how well Alexander Mattison's been playing since the pads came on? Do you think is there any chance that Jaylen Wright is not a lock at running back 2 with how Mattison's been looking with the pads on?
Yeah, interesting. I think Mattison's game is physicality. Like he's in the trenches. We didn't see much of him in the spring as far as splashing, but that's not his game. He's not going to pop the 4.3 speed running a 7-yard touchdown. He's going to try to help them in their maybe biggest weakness last year on the run game, those 3rd and 1s, those 4th and 1s, those goal lines. I think that's his role. I don't think he's entrenching a ton on Jaylen Wright because Jaylen Wright's going to have to help Devon Achane carry the load. Like Achane, we forget, still 175, 180 pound back. He's not going to get 400 touches this year. So Jaylen Wright's going to be your guy to handle some of those touches, get those breathers. And I think Alexander Mattison becomes that situational guy if he can beat out Alec Gordon for that role of, hey, those 5 to 7 carries a game that we really need, or even those 4-minute drives in the fourth quarter where we just need to bleed out the clock and make sure that we get a victory. That's where you see Alexander Mattison shine.
Noah Fant went to the Bengals after having a visit with the Miami Dolphins. They're still riding the Julian Hill train. And they've got Farrell Brown in there as well. But with Darren Waller, what are your expectations, or what are your realistic expectations for Darren Waller?
Man, I don't have any. Honestly, I'm just going to be transparent with you. He's a guy who hadn't played in a year and a half. I don't know what they're going to get. We heard him talk, and it seems like his vision and his passions about football, but he's on the PUP list. We haven't seen him practice yet. I don't know what the timeline is. Mike McDaniel said soon, but I just don't, the team obviously feels good enough about him to sign him. But being committed from now to February is something we're going to have to see. They don't have a lot of risk in the deal. And so I think anything you get out of Darren Waller should be a benefit, a boost. I think it would be unfair and maybe a little bit unrealistic to say, hey, he's going to come back, play 17 games, get 700, 800 yards, 5, 6 touchdowns, and immediately be that third weapon that Jonnu Smith was in the offense. I think he's maybe 3 or 4 years away since that player. And so I think you're going to have to, calm the expectations and say, hey, if he can give us anything, if he can contribute, give us something in the passing game, then we'll take that.
Obviously you talked about Tua's health. That's imperative. I mean, he needs to stay healthy here. But you've noticed Tyreek and Tua have dropped down a lot of the quarterback wide receiver duo lists. I mean, Jaylen, Waddle, him and Tua, they're kind of being disrespected and not being seen as like a top 10 trio. Do you think this is going to be a breakout year for Tyreek, like a bounce back breakout year? And it seems like all offseason, Tua and Jaylen Waddle have been trying to make the point that Jaylen can be a number 1 receiver in this league. Do you think we're going to see a big year from Jaylen Waddle too?
Yeah, I do, man. I think he's been a lot more focused on the smaller details, route running, catching with his hands. I know Dolphins fans get burned where they look at a couple of key drops he's had in every season. It's like, man, I think some of those things are just a little focus points, and it's easy to take your focus off when Tyreek Hill is all that people talk about, all the focus points of defenses. But Jaylen Waddle has been a number one on previous teams, previous Dolphins teams, and he has that ability. I just think he's that extra push. There's a difference between, hey, I'm a really good player to I'm going to be the best. And I think I've seen some of that motivation from him this year. I think there's an honest, real world where this could be Tyreek Hill's last year. And so you may be walking into the start of Jaylen Waddle as your number one receiver era. And so I think that requires a little bit more from Jaylen. And I think that he and Tua are putting in that extra work. And I think he'll easily be back over 1,000 yards this year, back on his previous flow.
Awesome. And final question here for you. How important is it that this team has a strong first half with all of the changes that have happened this offseason, as well as the pressure that is on Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer? Because Tyreek, I mean, you could be in a situation where if you're having a bad first half, you could have, instead of a breakout, we're having a crash out. How important is it that they really have a strong first half to this season? And Anthony, we were waiting in the wings too, right?
Yeah, it's huge because look, what have we been talking about all offseason? Culture. How do they respond to this different vibe of how they're trying to change the team and accountability and discipline? A lot of things that solidify our culture are seeing the results. And it's easy to say that right now when you're 0-0 and everything is all fine and dandy and we got great leaders, great new leaders, all that stuff. If you go out and lose a game to the Colts and Indy, you go out to lose a game against the Patriots, you got two, let's call it what it is, should be wins on your schedule the first two games. If you start struggling out the gate, go 1-1, 0-2, then people start looking around and it's like, is this culture better? Should we be really focused? You start to have people, it happens every time. People start questioning themselves, and that's when things go sideways. So I think more than ever, that strong early start is key for them to really solidify what they've been talking about all offseason.
All right, Cam, I appreciate you for coming through. Tell people where they can find you on social media and what you have on deck for everyone.
Yeah, you can find me at Cameron Wolfe with the E at the end on Twitter, at Cameron D Wolfe with the E at the end on Instagram. And we'll be doing NFL Network coverage all through Inside Training Camp, all for the next week and a half. I will be down in Miami on Saturday for practice. We'll be interviewing Tyreek Hill. We'll be interviewing Minka Fitzpatrick, Mike McDaniel. I think Bradley Chubb's coming on set too. So we just did Tua last week, trying to get another round of Dolphins. So tune in Saturday. We'll be up early, starting at 9 a.m., having all those interviews for you and a lot of coverage from training camp, me, Tom Pelissero, Brian Baldinger. So we're going to talk trenches, O-line, D-line, and we'll have some fun. So tune in, and we'll be talking ball not only this week, but all through the summer.
Appreciate you for coming on. And as always, everyone, smash that like button, subscribe if you're new, and fins up all day, every day.